Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're looking at something that honestly feels a little bit like magic for anyone who uses a Mac. We are going to be breaking down the software barrier between Mac and PC. So let's just dive right into this, because for decades, the computing world has been strictly divided into two completely different camps, right? You had Apple and you had Microsoft. But what if that wall is finally coming down? It's a really compelling question. What if your Mac could run Windows software without actually running Windows? Look, it's a universal pain point. You absolutely love your Mac. You love the hardware, the operating system, that incredible trackpad, but inevitably, you get locked out of that one essential piece of software. Maybe it's a specific accounting program your company uses, some ancient utility app, or a massive blockbuster game that literally never got a macOS release. Historically, you had to completely reboot your machine using Boot Camp or buy a really heavy piece of virtualization software. But there is actually another way. And that solution is CrossOver. It's what's known as a compatibility application, developed by a company called CodeWeavers, and it's built right on top of the open source Wine project. Now, the brilliant thing here is that it lets you run Windows apps directly on macOS. And let me be absolutely clear about what this means. It requires no separate Windows license. You don't have to buy Windows, and you definitely don't have to sit through those frustrating reboots just to switch between operating systems. You literally just open your Windows app right next to your Mac apps. Let's look under the hood at translation versus virtualization. Let's take a quick tech-light journey to demystify how this actually works without putting Windows on your computer. So on one side, we have a virtual machine, like parallels of VMware. A virtual machine runs an entire full-blown copy of Windows inside your Mac. Think of it like building a whole new house inside your living room just so you have a place to read one specific book. It takes up a massive amount of RAM, it has a huge CPU overhead, and it will absolutely drain your battery. On the flip side, we have CrossOver. CrossOver doesn't build a new house. Instead, it acts as a lightning-fast, real-time translator. When a Windows application asks the computer to do something, like draw a window or play a sound, CrossOver catches that instruction and instantly translates it into a language that macOS actually understands. The results? Way lower RAM usage, lower CPU overhead, and significantly better battery life. Now, to manage all these translations safely, CrossOver uses something super clever. They call it a bottle. A bottle is basically an isolated Windows environment within CrossOver that acts like its own standalone mini Windows installation. And this is really CrossOver's hero feature. Imagine if you had a super messy desk, but you could put each individual project into its own soundproof, sealed container. That's exactly what bottles do. They safely sandbox your different setups to prevent applications from ever conflicting with one another. In practice, it's incredibly simple. You can easily create a new bottle, say specifically a Windows 7 environment, because, some older legacy software completely breaks if it even thinks it's running on Windows 10 or 11. With CrossOver, you just select Windows 7 from a drop-down menu, click Create, and in seconds, boom, you've spun up an isolated, customized environment tailored exactly for that specific piece of older software. And hey, you also get a massive level of granular control if you really want it. Inside a bottle dedicated purely to Steam, for example, you have options for things like DXVK and high-resolution mode. Because each bottle maintains its own entirely separate registry and DLL configurations, it becomes this incredibly safe and flexible testing ground. If you mess something up while tweaking settings for a game, you don't break your whole system. You literally just delete that specific bottle and start over. Easy. Now, onto the Mac gaming revolution and the introduction of Apple Silicon. So this is where the story of CrossOver really shifts into high gear and transforms into real-world entertainment. We are talking about massive, demanding AAA titles here. The Witcher 3, Fallout 4, Diablo 4, Hogwarts Legacy. CrossOver goes way beyond basic utilities and actually delivers high-end gaming experiences on a Mac. And this is possible because Apple's M1 through M4 chips are just incredibly powerful. Plus, CrossOver has heavily optimized its software to translate those complex DirectX graphics instructions directly into Apple's native Metal Graphics framework. Playing a wildly demanding game like Diablo 4 smoothly on a MacBook is an actual reality now. When you use CrossOver to play a game like this on Apple Silicon, you aren't just getting acceptable frame rates. Users consistently report lower heat generation and far better battery efficiency compared to running that exact same game through a heavy virtual machine. It literally turns a standard MacBook into a highly capable, legitimate gaming rig. Of course, not everything is a game, right? Whether you need thousands of productivity apps like Microsoft Office or some hyper-specific legacy accounting tool, you kind of need to know if it will actually work before you try it. while CodeWeavers provides this massive, community-driven database with a very clear rating system. Platinum means the software works nearly perfectly right out of the box. Gold means it works really well, but might need a tiny tweak. Silver and bronze mean you might encounter some friction, and unsupported means exactly what it sounds like. It sets a very clear expectation right from the jump. Now, if you find your app is supported, the setup process is beautifully frictionless. It's just 5 simple steps. You download the app, launch it, search for the program you want, create your bottle, and install. That is the whole shebang. Step 5 is definitely the best part. You just launch the Windows app directly from your macOS dock, exactly like any standard Mac application. If you remember the dark ages of manually configuring complex wine wrappers with actual lines of code, this modern setup process is an absolute breath of fresh air.
But let's look at the kryptonite, the limitations and reality checks.
As enthusiastic as we are about this, we have to responsibly set expectations, because CrossOver isn't actually Windows. The most crucial point is this: anti-cheat fails. If you are a competitive multiplayer gamer, listen up. Modern multiplayer games frequently use kernel-level anti-cheat systems. We're talking programs like Easy Anti-Cheat, Vanguard for Valorant, or BattleEye. These will not work through CrossOver, period. These systems look for a genuine physical Windows operating system, and the second they detect a translation layer, they block you entirely. This is currently the biggest roadblock for macOS gaming for sure.
Furthermore, there is absolutely no kernel access. Any program demanding deep, driver-level interaction with the physical computer hardware simply cannot function through a translation layer. So if you have a highly specialized piece of hardware that requires a custom Windows USB driver to function, or if a piece of software is wrapped in advanced DRM security modules, it's going to crash. CrossOver is a translator, remember? Not a hardware emulator.
So, making the choice: CrossOver versus the alternatives.
With those limitations in mind, you have to decide if this tool is the right investment for your specific needs. CrossOver's biggest competitor in this space right now is an alternative called Whisky, which is also built on Wine. Now, Whisky is completely free, while CrossOver is a paid product. However, paying for CrossOver gets you dedicated, commercial technical support, heavily optimized and frequent updates, a much more user-friendly interface, and that massive official compatibility database we talked about earlier. So if you want a tinkerer's project, Whisky is great. But if you want a polished product with an actual team of engineers ensuring your software runs, CrossOver is the premium option. Which brings us to a rather profound final thought. Are we moving toward a future where the operating system you buy no longer limits the software you can run? CrossOver is actively liberating software from the strict constraints of the OS. By translating instructions in real time, they are proving that you can buy the hardware you love without permanently sacrificing the software you need. It really leaves you pondering a future where cross-platform computing is completely seamless. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep exploring the possibilities of your hardware.